I think with surveying that one of the real difficult elements of residential surveying is that we have customers that we will serve one time and one time only, and they may never move again.
That is Lucie Walker, Director at Walker Dunn, and after spending more than a decade building and scaling a successful surveying practice, we discuss one of the biggest challenges that everyone faces in the residential sector, the fact that you often only get one chance to get it right.
You don't get any repeat customers. You're starting over every single time.
She explains why residential surveying is uniquely demanding and how building infrastructure, processes and consistency is what allows a firm to scale without compromising quality.
Without having the infrastructure and the processes behind that, you're going to stumble and you're not going to have any room for growth in the long term.
Today, Lucie outlines how to build the structure behind a residential surveying firm so that growth is sustainable, repeatable, and protected. And hopefully, by the end of this episode, you'll learn how to create systems that protect quality, drive growth, and turn one-time clients into long-term momentum. I'm Louis Blaxill, and this is The Surveying Shift.
Welcome to this episode of The Surveying Shift. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing on starting and scaling a residential surveying practice. And with me, I have Lucie, who is Director of Walker Dunn and founder of Jargon, which we'll be touching on later. Lucie, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and introducing Walker Dunn.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, obviously, for having me on the podcast, first of all, Louis. So my background is kind of, as most people in surveying, is a totally different route, again, to probably everyone else. And I originally have always said when I was younger, I was never going to be anything in property, just because I come from a family of mainly estate agents and a few surveyors now. So it was always the kind of, I'm going to do something different, which is what I originally set out to do. Went away and studied as an economist, kind of started my career as an economist, working with local councils in a very corporate setting, worked for kind of Arup and Mott MacDonald in the past, very kind of big corporate firms. And then after a while of doing that, found myself back in the property world when the opportunity to kind of join Walker Dunn came up. And so Walker Dunn, started as a very, very small independent firm, residential firm, just a couple of surveyors essentially doing a little bit of panel work, no real direction, kind of a name and nothing else, no brand, no kind of infrastructure in the background, nothing really to kind of take them forward and scale or do anything more than what they were already doing. We've now been going for just over a decade. And over that time, we have gradually kind of expanded in terms of team numbers, turnover, geographically. And so now, after starting just in Liverpool, if you can't tell by the accent, we've now expanded to cover a good chunk of the north. So we cover from kind of Derbyshire and all the way up to Fleetwood. And we're not quite done yet either.
Very good. And you are too modest to say that you've been instrumental in the company's success, but you become abundantly clear as part of the conversation. The way I wanted to structure this, if I may, is we'll start with kind of those early days, and actually it'd be interesting to dig into your motivation for joining, right? Because it was a bit of a left turn for you, I suppose, having gone into the economic side of things. And then we'll apply two lenses as we go through it and talk about the early days and what you think was instrumental in growing the business from, as you said, a relatively small company to where you are today, and the important things that you're focusing on today. And hopefully that way we'll be able to touch on or inform people who'll be on various different stages of that journey. So take you way back to the beginning. What caused the shift in your mindset, other than the gravitational pull to property?
Unfortunately, it's kind of it is in the blood, unfortunately, and it was always going to get me eventually. But I resisted as long as I could. So I'd kind of, as I say, I'd gone down the economics route, and I'd kind of, when I joined Arup, I was working partially in the nuclear industry and partially with local councils up in Cumbria. So kind of working on ways to regenerate the areas around Sellafield and small towns and the issues they have being so rural. Yeah. And after a while of kind of working on that, it's really, really interesting. But unfortunately, in that world, you don't really get a lot of you don't really see the fruits of your labour because things happen very slow. Government doesn't get funding, stuff like that. So Walker Dunn in the background had kind of started. It was, as I say, very, very small. And they were at a point where it was like, okay, well, things need to change if we are going to get any bigger, but we can't really do that alone because what we're doing at the moment isn't doing, isn't making that work for us. I was kind of ready to jump out of the corporate space and do something else. I'd always had an ambition to have my own company and grow something from the ground up. So it was just right timing for me to just jump into something else and take the risk. It was, I suppose, at the same time, I was kind of at the point where what else can I do in economics that will give me what I'm looking for, which is instant kind of feedback on stuff that you're trying to do. And I'm not sure there was anything for me in that direction. So this was like the dream opportunity to kind of, right, I'm going to throw everything into this and see what we can build. And 2 years later, we have what we have.
Yeah. I imagine day one, you got that in spades in terms of, when you're a company of that size, anything that you try, anything that you do, you can see the impact almost tomorrow, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I suppose, first of all, when you were entertaining the idea of joining Walker Dunn, what was your ambition? What did your vision look like when you first joined? Did you go in with, look, we're going to take over the world, we're going to grow to the size that you are now, or did you think, actually, you know what, incremental growth would be sufficient? We're hopeful that we'll just build it and gradually over time.
So I'd be lying if I said, at the start of Walker Dunn, we had this amazing vision to what we are today. I think it was at the start very, very scrappy. Lots of just trying to see what will work. I came in from a completely different background. So surveying was new in the sense of, although I'd been surrounded by kind of the property industry my entire life, I'd never actually worked in it. So it was all new from that point of view. So it was kind of, okay, first of all, let's make this a proper company that has a bit of traction, that we can kind of, first of all, have some clients. We had kind of one source of work at that point. So it was very, very, it was a risky and small.
What do you mean by, making it into a real business? What were the key things that you went, actually, in order for us to build a foundation for growth, we did these 4 things, and that actually set us on the right path?
So I think the main thing, when you are kind of at the very start, I think it's quite easy to be excited about the prospect of having a business and thinking only about, right, I need to get out, I need to make money, I need to kind of do the instructions. But without having kind of the infrastructure and the processes behind that, you're going to stumble and you're not going to have any kind of room for growth in the long term. So I think that's what really set us in motion at the start, was just getting that infrastructure right. And it was just kind of, even the smaller things like having a brand and stuff like that's all nice to have and was really important. But I think the biggest thing for us was really just having processes in place, like our standard kind of operating procedures, that meant that what we were delivering to customers was going to be the same every time, or how we were dealing with queries was going to be kind of the same every time, and starting to kind of build that in the background so that it wasn't us kind of scrambling every time that, the same query came through. Oh, we've already dealt with that. It's having a system, I suppose, and being able to repeat that, because that's how then, obviously, if your customers feel like they're having a good service, that's how you start to gain that traction, gain that recognition. Maybe it's in reviews, maybe it's in they've spoken to 5 other people and they've shared they've had a good experience. And I think for us, that all started with having an infrastructure in the background that made sure that what we were doing was consistent.
You talked about kind of good reviews and feedback from customers. I'm sure that, I suppose, unlocked further surveys and built a reputation. How else do you mentioned you had one source of leads to start with. Yeah. What else did you do to kind of get Walker Dunn on the map and get, I suppose, pipeline coming in?
Yeah. So in the early days, it was very much, and still true now, to be honest. I think that the biggest way that you can build your kind of client network is just getting face to face with other businesses in the residential space. If that's where you're working, just getting out there and meeting people, making the connections. I think there's lots of other tools that we can kind of tap into. Obviously, social media is great as a great tool for all businesses now. But in residential surveying, social media isn't necessarily where your customer's going to go to find you. It's somewhere that they're probably going to go once they've seen you on Google. They're then going to check you out next on your social media to see maybe what kind of business you are, and then maybe decide if they want to go with you from there. But it's not where they're going to kind of search for, surveyor in Liverpool. They're not going on Instagram to do that. I think that's a nice thing to have. But I think the more important things are kind of making the connections, getting the referrals, setting up maybe links with local estate agents or local mortgage advisors, and kind of building the connections there. And then kind of once you've got your kind of customer journey and you've got customers who are leaving you good reviews, or maybe they're leaving reviews that are going back to the estate agent who referred you. That's how you kind of make that connection a little bit stronger and make sure that you kind of retain that connection in the long term. So that's how we've kind of done it.
When you say going out and meeting estate agents, that the prospect of doing that without a plan, without a kind of approach, I imagine is daunting for some. Was there any kind of tips, tricks that you deployed in terms of, okay, this is how I'm going to get them to remember me, this is how I'm going to get them to refer work our way? It's
not everybody's favorite thing, particularly I find even in my team now, you've got some surveyors who love that selling part and other surveyors who just want to run and hide and don't want to touch it at all. And that's fine. I think unfortunately, if you are going to run your own business, it's going to be part of it. Yeah, it's part of it. So you've got to learn to like it. And with kind of making the connections, I think it's good to understand that it's not about maybe going in once and leaving a card and having a quick conversation. You're probably going to have to touch base with that one estate agent maybe 3 to 5 times before they actually go, oh, actually, do you know what? I will refer. And that could be even a few months before that first referral comes through, just because obviously they need to be reminded that you're there, that you're a useful service. And also it needs to be in their mind at the time that there's a potential customer in front of them. So it's all about just being kind of constantly going back to them and reminding them of what you can offer. And obviously at some point they will, if they like what you've kind of offered them, they will then try out a referral with you.
I suppose, not dissimilarly to your story, people coming into the surveying industry and building their own practices, no doubt there were things that you weren't necessarily anticipating. I would be very surprised if you went, this is exactly what I pictured happening when I joined Walker Dunn. What surprised you? What challenges did you face, particularly in that early stage of going, I thought this would be easy, or I was really surprised actually this was pivotal to our success?
I think with surveying, that one of the real difficult elements of residential surveying is that we have customers that we will serve one time and one time only, and they may never move again, or it may be 30 years before they move, and they may not use your services again. And so I think getting that bit right is really important, and that's probably the hardest point, is that you don't get any kind of repeat customers. So you don't get like
starting over all over again.
You're starting over every single time. And I think it's hard then, obviously, because to generate more work, you're literally generating new work all the time. And that's probably one of the hardest things at the start, because you're looking at diaries and thinking, well, I've still got to film next week and nobody's got any jobs yet, right? Where can I find work? And that is quite hard. But it's kind of also, when you're looking at the service that you're offering, it's making sure that you are getting it right every time, because you don't get a chance to redeem yourself if you don't get it right. It's not like selling a t-shirt, for example, where you can throw them a discount code, maybe they'll come back to you again. You get it right the second time, and then maybe you've got a repeat customer. We don't get that opportunity to kind of, it's a one shot and then it's done. So if it wasn't good, they're going to tell, people and or leave you a bad review.
And
so it is
the internet, right? That's the real challenge, particularly when you're starting out and you've got your precious bank of reviews. Inevitably one bad review dilutes a small number far more than it does.
Exactly.
On that note, I mean, when I have conversations with people, inevitably, because it's not a very pleasant experience, but also I think because it's not something that surveyors necessarily consider at the forefront of the mind when you're starting out the business, the claims side of things. You may say you're absolutely whiter than white, but I think a byproduct of producing home buyer surveys is eventually you're going to get your first claim right. And as a small company, that's one, quite daunting, and two, enormously time consuming. I'd be interested to know whether you've got any kind of war stories from that side of things and how you dealt with that, particularly when you were smaller.
Yeah, I actually, one that sticks in my mind and it probably will be there forever is it was actually probably in the first couple of years of Walker Dunn, and it was somebody put in a claim, and I want to say that the claim was for 30 to 40 grand, something like that. It was a huge amount of money. And they'd basically gone into the property, ripped every bit of the property apart, taken pictures of it, and then gone, you haven't noticed all these things behind it. Yeah. But it was quite obvious that this purchaser was clearly, it was a rip out type of property. They were going to renovate it. So they just wanted us to pay for the renovation essentially. Which is annoying. And that does happen. We've had, every firm gets claims. But that one in particular, it went all the way to the Ombudsman, and it was pages and pages and pages of a letter that we had to respond to. And it took, I remember being at my desk at like 9 o'clock at night, just trying to put together a response to this complaint. But it definitely, number one, taught me how to deal with complaints very early on.
Very quickly,
because in the end, we didn't have to pay a penny. So, which is because obviously none of it was actually anything that was incorrect in our report. It's quite clear that it was just somebody trying it on. But it does mean that, it strengthens some of the kind of phrases that we use in our reports to kind of cover some of the things that maybe weren't as obvious, or where the advice probably wasn't as clear in the report that we'd done. So it was, I think that was my real first experience. But I deal with all the complaints, unfortunately, in our business. And that one really, really sticks with me just because it was just so lengthy to deal with. And it was the first one that had gone all the way to the Ombudsman. So you're obviously thinking if they find in their favour 40, I mean, that could be us done tomorrow. So it was huge.
Hey, here's something I hear a lot. Keeping up with QA, auditing and regulations feels like a full-time job. And indeed, for some of our customers, it is. With Go Report, QA and compliance doesn't have to be complicated. Our smart reporting templates are built around industry standards, and all your notes, photos and comments are saved on our system, so you and anyone else reviewing your reports has the full picture. If you want to simplify QA and compliance, click the QR code or see the link in the show notes. Now, back to the episode.
I suppose it emphasises the importance, and maybe Walker Dunn, when you joined, already had a pretty good set of terms and a reasonable bank of phrases, but I suppose it emphasises the importance of setting that foundation early, right? And making sure that either you're getting advice from other people, and I think actually this is probably a good time to talk about jargon and making sure you're using the right phrases and making sure that you're not using unnecessary caveats, certainly, but you have got yourself covered where you need to.
I think obviously Jargon, as you just mentioned, so Jargon is a new venture that we've just launched early this year, which is essentially providing those standard phrases for the level 2 and the level 3 reports, but integrating it with the likes of Go Report. So that just makes things 1,000 times easier from a report writing point of view. But what I found, because obviously we use Jargon in Walker Dunn, and what I found is that when I deal with complaints, I can instantly know whether, we will have said the right advice or not. based on kind of what I know of our phrases. And a lot of the time it comes down to whether you've put a customer on notice of a certain element and whether you've provided kind of the right next steps in terms of the advice you've given. And that's what the Ombudsman will look at, because at the end of the day, a lot of the people looking at these complaints working for the Ombudsman aren't necessarily surveyors. They're just reading your report and kind of trying to understand whether you've given what they consider to be a good amount of advice on that, whatever the element is that they're complaining about. So I have found that, in the last probably 5 to 6 years, the complaints that we've had have been so easy to deal with, because I know we've already said
you fall within the category. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So it makes it so much easier. You already know, if you've chosen, such a phrase, you will have said the correct advice that goes with that defect, because you already are using those standard phrases. So
I suppose that's the difference, particularly when you are smaller, between spending hours, days, months, weeks on a claim and actually, we can nip this in the bud relatively quickly, which is, as you said, not only the financial or potential financial impact, but the time you have to sink into it, which isn't doing surveys, the stress it puts you under when you might be going out generating business is critical to avoid if you can.
Especially, in those early days, because you're kind of wearing all the hats at that point. So any time that you're spending on something like a complaint is time away from actually earning money and kind of doing the instructions. So you want to make sure you can streamline that as much as possible. And knowing that you will have already put the right advice in, you don't have to doubt whether it was relevant or whether it was kind of, using the right terminology, because you've got that already in place. All you need to know is whether you actually commented on that defect or not, I suppose. And that comes down to knowledge at the end of the day.
I suppose that takes us nicely on to, you built a solid foundation by the sounds of things. I'd imagine with the team that already existed, and as you said, you built processes and systems. We'll kind of take almost a little step forwards. At what point, what was the trigger where you went, actually, you know what, we're comfortable now. We've dealt with our first claim. We've got all the processes in place. We know what we're going to do if X, Y, Z happens. Maybe, and I suppose that has to be kind of paired with demand, and you're going, actually, we can't fulfill as many, all of the surveys and requests that we're getting in. What was it that triggered you to go, actually, know what we can look to expand now?
You're right. It kind of, expansion can be kind of two ways, really. It can be that you've got so much demand and you kind of go, actually, you really need someone because we've got too much work, which is a great problem to have. Or it could be, we just want to branch into a new area. We've found a new surveyor that we really like, and we want to be in this next kind of neighbouring area or somewhere completely different. So it's one of the two. I think for us, it was kind of, once we got to a point where we looked at ourselves, almost kind of an internal audit of what we were doing, everything was kind of running like clockwork, I suppose, in the background. We were really, really efficient in everything that we were doing. We were starting to gain traction. We were getting lots of good reviews through. Our profitability was, decent at that point. That's when you can go, right, okay, I know I can go copy and paste. This is going to work if I add another surveyor. And we'd grown to a point where we could then have, a few extra team members in the background. So on the operations side, and one in particular on the business development side, which meant that at that point we could then literally go up to any area.
Pressure,
yeah. And just if it was the right area that we wanted to go into, it meant obviously we'd have to start from scratch in that area, but we had the structure already to do that. We knew how to do it. We've already done it. We know it's worked for this area and that area. So it's just a case of, right, okay, let's do that again.
Don't by any means list one by one everyone that's joined the business, but going from you and a couple of surveyors, what was the first move that you made, and how did the profile change team? The team change? You mentioned that you took on admin staff. At what point did you take that venture? What was the organic growth that you saw in the team?
So at the start, I was kind of all the things. So I was kind of the admin, the HR, the IT, all the hats, your background, everything. I like to say everything kind of non-surveying at that point. I was like, right, if you've got a non-surveying question, it comes to me. So we managed to, just with kind of me in place, take on a couple of other surveyors. But at that point, once we were about 4 surveyors in, it got to the point where it was just, I couldn't then support all of that whilst running the business, whilst trying to, also look at expansion and stuff like that. So then one of our first moves was business development, because it meant that we could then open up to new areas quicker. We'd already done it with kind of the 4 surveys that we had. So we knew that at that point, what we had was working. It was working for all 4 of them. We'd kind of tested it enough on 4 surveyors. So then we could kind of expand and grow from there.
What were you looking for in a business development role? The reason I ask is, I'd imagine, someone going on this journey typically would probably have a surveying background themselves. I appreciate not everyone does, but they'd probably be able to hire other good surveyors, right? Or at least surveyors that they know will adhere to their standards and produce good reports on the company's behalf. But then venturing into, okay, what does a BD role look like? What do they spend their time doing? I imagine for a number of people, that's quite daunting.
I have to admit, a lot of the kind of, when we started to take on brand new roles at the start, a lot of it was kind of, we're not actually sure what we're looking for, but let's put together what we think that might look like. And obviously then we'll go to market and see what there is. And if we find the right person, and the business development person that we took on, she's still with us now. She came from an estate agent background. So that felt like a very natural kind of transfer over. She already knew the industry. She already had a sales background. So for us, that felt natural, like a natural sidestep for her. And it is hard, because I think that's one of the benefits that we had. Because I wasn't a surveyor, I had kind of a different insight or a different outlook for what the business needed. And I wasn't kind of bogged down with the technical side of things or worrying about the report side of things. So I could see what the business needed, and I could look at it more from a customer's point of view, and kind of put myself in their shoes reading the reports. And would I understand this? Would I enjoy this kind of customer journey that we've got in place? Would I think this was a good experience? So I think we benefited from the fact that I didn't have that background, because it meant that I could then find someone that I thought would work to grow the business from kind of the operations point of view, rather than it being kind of surveying based. Because I don't think the skills to be a good surveyor aren't necessarily the same skills you need to then expand the business. They're kind of, different.
And understandably, not everyone wants to go on that route, right? There's perfectly,
exactly.
Well, there's very, very good surveying practices, which are just 1 or 2 surveyors who are extremely good at what they do. But
exactly.
I agree. It's a different mindset to grow a business. And on that note, it doesn't come, or it comes rather with risks, right? In the sense that you are going beyond your trusted pool of surveyors, and actually everyone gets a little bit more at arm's length, because you have to trust them into the anything. You touched on kind of processes and systems. Yeah. What fundamentals did you get in place in order to go, right, I have complete confidence that when we bring on someone and we've interviewed them and we're comfortable they've got technical capabilities, that they're going to execute surveys in such a way that we'd like to?
That's the scariest part, I think. I think when you do start taking on new surveyors, it's not only that you're kind of, or new team members in general, it's not only that you're kind of bringing someone into the fold and taking on the responsibility of their livelihood, you're also trusting them with what you've built. So it's kind of, it's a back and forth, isn't it? So, for us, obviously, I've touched on kind of the systems and having those in place, and it's so much easier to kind of share how you do things if there's already a system in place. I think back kind of at the very start, we didn't have any use of Go Report. At that point, we were very much using just Word documents, and it was, send it to a typist, wait a couple of days, wait for it to come back, check it over, and that whole process was lengthy. And at that point, we did have our bank of phrases in place. So at least we had that. But the formatting would always be out, and somebody would always be sending a report that, the front page was kind of, the logo had gone off somewhere else. And it was just a nightmare. And those would always come back to me like, oh, can you fix this? And not that I was an IT expert, but for some reason they'd always fall on my desk. So one of the things that really helped was actually getting our report writing software in place. Once we started using that, it did mean that, I don't have to worry about how a report's looking when anyone sends out a report. I know that the format will be exactly the same every single time. And then when we've added in, obviously, the jargon phrases, it means that I know exactly the content that's going to go out to the customer is going to be consistent and of good quality every single time. So when you bring somebody on, all you're kind of doing is, one, making sure that the knowledge is where it needs to be. And obviously, maybe there's some training to do to make sure that they're at that right level to go out and do a survey on their own. But then after that, it's literally just can use the app, have a look at the phrases. And once those are in place, it's very easy to kind of just start. There's no kind of downtime once you've got that in place. So that really, really advanced things for us. And then, because obviously when we bring new surveyors on, and just in general anyway, we do some internal auditing of reports. So, and having kind of your standard phrases and whatnot in place means that when you're auditing, you already know what you're looking for. You're not reading, 5 different styles of writing. You know that grammatically it's going to be correct. So really, you're just looking to make sure that we're reporting on the right things.
I mean, I suppose fast forwarding even further now to where you currently are, and in terms of your scale, you're still growing. How do you go about, I suppose, keeping that culture, keeping that growth going when you've already achieved an impressive scale?
Yeah, you've just said the word culture, which is one of the hard things, I think, because you've spent a long time trying to obviously build the right culture within your team. And whoever you bring on, you want to make sure that they're going to add value to that. They're not going to kind of disrupt the culture that you've kind of spent all those years putting together. And I think one of the things that probably the biggest headache of running a business and of running a surveying business is the recruitment side of things, because there's not a huge pool of surveyors to go at. When you need surveyors because the market heats up, no one's looking to move. Everyone's looking for surveyors, or no one's looking to move because they're so busy. When it cools down, no one's looking. No one wants to hire, but everyone's looking. So it's kind of, it's a real hard thing to kind of master. But we take the view that we're kind of almost open for recruitment all year round. If the right CV comes across our desk and we feel they'll be the right fit, I'd rather take a risk and take them on.
What does right CV mean for you?
It could be anything. So we've taken a lot of SAVA graduates in the past, and we've also taken a lot of experienced surveyors. So it's not necessarily, there isn't kind of a one size and that we'll take. We just look at kind of the whole package. What's the background? What is the current team looking like? If we've got, maybe if we're trainee heavy, maybe we'd be looking for some more experienced surveyors, or if it's, the other way around, we might be prepared to take on some more SAVA graduates at that point. So it really just depends where we're at with the current team. But it really all comes down to, regardless of experience, it really comes down to finding like-minded individuals, because we are, still a relatively small company. So we all work very closely together. So it absolutely has to be someone who has the right attitude and is kind of going to add to that team and be a team player. And that is really difficult to get right. And I definitely haven't gotten that right every single time.
In any business.
In any business, yeah. So. No. no.
And for a variety of reasons, but sometimes, as you said, it's just that intangible kind of just not working culturally, or personalities clash, or whatever it may be.
It's such, because it is such there's such a small pool of surveyors. When there are surveyors looking, naturally there's more than yourself who's kind of looking at that candidate. It's probably 4 or 5 other surveying firms all competing for that one candidate. So during the interview stage, you get very limited window to kind of assess whether they're the right person for you, assess whether they've got the right experience, and then kind of put an offer together and see if they'll want to come on board before somebody else kind of steps in and snaps them up. So it's all happens very, very quickly. So you don't really get that chance to really get to know someone. I mean, this is probably true in every business, but you know, it's a risk on both sides.
It's always, yeah. Aside from the obvious salary, how do you differentiate yourself in terms of an employer value proposition? How do you attract the talent that you need to continue the growth?
So I think one of the things that benefits us is that we are kind of the size that we are. So it means that there's a lot less kind of red tape between, directors and the rest of the staff. We all try and make sure that we're really having loads of communication with the whole team. It's all just a very kind of familiar vibe in terms of how we work. And people like that style. They like having the flexibility. They like being able to just call me up, have a chat. If there's something wrong, we'll sort it. Let's have a chat and figure it out. Whereas I think when you're in a bigger firm or even in a corporate firm, and a lot of people come to us from a corporate setup because they're looking for something a little bit more kind of, I suppose, just familiar in terms of, being able to touch base with all of your team members and know who you were. And kind of have contact with your team members, because it's a very lonely job. Everybody works remotely. Everybody's out there doing their own instructions on their own. So making sure that there's enough time for kind of team get-togethers, meetings, socials, and that people who want to can touch base with other people in the team. That's really good as well.
You mentioned corporates there. That brings us nicely on, I suppose, to the next step. Not to say that that's our ambition at all, but unfortunately, corporates are the way they are for a reason, right? Inevitably, once you get to a certain scale, you do lose that personal touch. What's the ambition for Walker Dunn, and what, I suppose, do you see as key drivers that are going to enable you to get to the next phase of the business?
Yeah. I think for Walker Dunn, we have always said we never want to be the size of a corporate. Like it just, it isn't
model isn't the same, right?
No. And I think what would happen is if we got too big, the kind of great team that we have now would suddenly think, actually, this doesn't work for me anymore because I joined for a certain reason. And actually, because my background was corporate, some of the things that I kind of tried at the start of Walker Dunn that I'd kind of been used to in a corporate world, they didn't really work. It didn't. It very obviously, it became obvious that just wasn't going to work in this setup. So I want to kind of steer clear of being kind of that way. So I'd really love to grow to the point where, I suppose it's a difficult question, isn't it? Because what's the size before before you tip over into that world? But I think because we still want to grow at a gradual pace, we kind of don't want to be taking on 10 surveyors tomorrow. I just don't. I don't see that for us. I think we'll know it when we're at that point, and we'll kind of go, like, this is the limit for us. And this is where we want to stay.
Assuming you may well say that you are at that limit now, but assuming you're not at that limit, what do you see kind of driving growth? As I said, you've got a well-established presence now. Is it more sustainable growth? Is it more geographical expansion? Is it good surveyors in attractive locations that drives that next step?
Yeah, I think it's a mix, really. So I think we've got some of our core areas, geographical areas that are really, really busy, and we could do with probably another couple of surveyors in those areas. But I'd also like to expand geographically and just have a little bit more coverage in the north. I think there's lots of areas we haven't tapped into yet. So, and I quite, what seems to work is when we tap into kind of neighbouring areas. So we're able to kind of still benefit from some connections, maybe in some neighbouring towns, and we're just kind of expanding a little bit like that. So I think that's the growth that we see for Walker Dunn, is just slowly but surely kind of widening our area from where we currently are.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, actually. I mean, I've had discussions, I think, on another episode of the podcast where most people will, and I think the lowest risk option is to go to adjacent areas, right? As you said, where you've got connections, where you can, if it doesn't quite work out with one surveyor or they're away for whatever reason, you can still get people over there. I've seen rare instances of some of our customers actually have managed to kind of jump geographically. And I think, as you said, the sustainable and low risk option is to proliferate from core of where you are.
It is hard to do that. I mean, it's something we've tried in the past. And what tends to happen is when you have, as you say, those leave issues, or you just haven't got the kind of, you've filled your diary, you're too busy and not got any more availability to offer, you start obviously losing some of the clients that you've kind of built a connection with. So because you haven't got kind of two surveyors to rely on, or a neighbouring surveyor that could possibly, drive into that area. So it does, in the long run, it doesn't work out that well. I think it just ends up being harder to maintain, I suppose.
We've talked about, I suppose, the future of Walker Dunn. Difficult to separate that from the future of kind of residential surveying more broadly. With the consultation of the home buyer standards out at the moment, and lots of new technology and market forces influencing the way our industry will be in the future. What's on your list in terms of watch outs, things that excite you, things that concern you in the years to come?
The AI conversation is the big one at the moment, isn't it? Because obviously the RICS have just brought out their AI guidance. I think that's the first AI guidance that they've ever developed. And it's kind of on everybody's mind is, what does this mean? Where are we going to be in 5-10 years? I think what we can say is, the younger generations are more kind of visual, I suppose, learners now, and they prefer to have visuals rather than, say, a 50-page report or whatever to read through. Yeah. So I suppose in the long term, our kind of level 2 and level 3 surveys are going to have to naturally be more visual, and whether that's kind of just visuals in terms of more photographs, or whether in long term it's an interactive report. Maybe it's something that they can click through. It's a video with touch points and stuff like that. I think that's the direction that we'll probably end up going to long term. Obviously, AI is there for those who don't want to kind of read reports at the moment and want just a summary. That scares me slightly.
Are you finding customers are doing that and coming back to you with clearly AI generated questions?
I haven't seen much of it yet. I've seen some questions about, report gaps and stuff like that, which I definitely think has been an AI job. Because when you dig into what were the gaps, there's not much content behind that. It's more just kind of a very
there should be,
I suppose. Yeah.
Before the leaflet, like we've had said, they've cited specific regulations and laid out by RICS that just don't exist.
Yeah.
GPT has taken it upon itself to do that.
100%. Yeah. So it is definitely happening. It's that side of things. I suppose the kind of summarizing the report and not reading the report is a bit scary, just because obviously there's a lot of content in there that needs to be read as it's kind of written, and just having a summarized version won't give you the full picture. It's a bit concerning from that point of view, but I think we've just got to adapt, haven't we, to meet the expectations.
I think certainly the way that we're viewing it, Go Report, is there are a lot of things that can help the surveyor speed up the job, particularly in areas where it's more formulaic and perhaps don't need as much expertise input, more observational. And actually, I think, coming to the younger generations and expectations around surveyors, spending more time with the customer and freeing up more time to be spent with the customer and advising them. And you've raised a very good point. the notion of just giving them 3 bullet points that summarize an in-depth report is a scary one. But I think a report that's absolutely always going to be there and is going to need to be ratified by and built by a qualified surveyor, combined with time to walk the customer through it and highlight the salient points and make sure they really understand it, is quite an exciting future, hopefully.
I think you're right. Yeah. I think because obviously I think a lot of people are scared that AI is going to kind of take away the job of the surveyor. But actually, I think it's like what you've just said. It's the opposite. It's going to be that we're going to bring back a bit more face-to-face, or, whether it's Teams or whatever it is, conversation about, the property, about your report. A lot of people, one of the things we offer after, and I know a lot of surveyors do this, is the chance to have a chat with the surveyor after you've had your report. And the amount of people that don't bother to do that is surprising, because you're thinking that's not costing you anything extra. And
if anything saves you time. I imagine you get people that turn up and go, haven't even opened the report, tell me all about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Can we walk through every section? Yeah. But I think we're definitely going to move back towards a bit more of that kind of personal touch, rather than it being, because obviously we've got to add more value if people are able to get information from ChatGPT or whichever tool they're using. We've just got to add a bit more value, and that might be the personal touch.
AI is in such a position that people will use it to inform themselves, but they won't necessarily trust it. So I hope it'll be a force for good in terms of lead generation for surveyors as well. You've had people using basic tools or broad tools. ChatGPT is anything but basic, but broad tools to take pictures of defects and go, what might this be? And should I be concerned if ChatGPT goes, it could be any of these 3 things, and yes, you should probably get it checked out. Hopefully that then, makes people more aware of things that they should call a surveyor for. So there, I think there's positive strands to be pulled on as well there.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, any way that we can make the reporting side of it easier for surveyors, that surveyors just, want the report to take as little time as possible. And it all comes back to kind of the work-life balance, doesn't it? So if we can make that easier, it just means happier staff, happier surveyors, and more success, I suppose. Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us, Lucie. That was a really interesting conversation.
If you enjoyed today's episode or it gave you some food for thought, be sure to follow our show on your preferred podcast platform. To learn more about what we do at Go Report, visit goreport.com. The links are also in the bio. Until next time.